My guest today on the budget is someone whose voice and opinion matters, not just to stakeholders of the Indian economy, but I think Finance Minister and his Prime Minister will perhaps also be heeding to his opinions. We've got none other than former Finance Minister P Chidambaram joining us right here on ET now on the agenda. Thanks very much for being with us. This is an unprecedented budget of sorts, non-planned plan merger, railway budget merger, a fiscal year perhaps being carved out. But what do you think is the context of this budget? Because many of us believe the overarching shadow that this budget is being presented in is demonetization. Will it be any different from the discourse there is in the public domain right now?
Demonetization indeed will play heavily on the mind of the Finance Minister when he crunches the numbers and when he lays out a path forward. But I think there are issues equally serious, more serious than demonetization. I think there are questions being asked about the ability of the government to stay on course, fiscal consolidation. They slipped badly in 2015-16. There are questions about their projections of nominal GDP growth, about their projections of GDP growth, which will have an impact on revenue collections. And there are questions about their capacity to find the funds required to give a trigger or boost to the economy.
So that's really the overarching theme according to you, that whether there should be fiscal prudence or not. I'm just going to come to that in a bit. But are you concerned about the lack of clarity there is around data? I mean, the economic survey was presented today, and they do not still know the impact of demonetization, but they believe that the growth could be somewhere in the range of 6.5% to 7% for this fiscal, for next fiscal, 6.75% to 7.5%. So two questions there. Are you personally concerned about the lack of data? The RBI hasn't given a final figure. The CSO says they don't know a figure. The economic survey seems to be surveying completely in the dark. Are we budgeting in the dark this year?
No, they are whistling in the dark. They're not budgeting in the dark. We all know that demonetization will have an impact of at least 1% on GDP. The whole world seems to know that, except the Finance Ministry, the CSO, and the rather coy RBI. As on October 2016, CSOs projected GDP growth will fall to 7.1. November, December, Jan, Feb and March cannot bring them any cheer. It has to make matters worse. So I think our estimate that the GDP will be hit by at least 1%, and IMF concurs with that,
is realistic,
will turn out to be correct. And if they are still projecting, I have not read the economic survey completely, if they are still projecting a growth rate of 7.1 for the year that will end, 2016-17, and projecting another 7.5 or 8 for 2017-18, I think it's a gross exaggeration and they are wrong.
No, they're projecting 6.5 for this fiscal. If growth, they say growth will dent by half a percentage point due to demonetization. But do you concur on 6.75 to 7.5% for next fiscal?
No,
they believe there will be an accelerated growth because the pain will be transitory from demonetization.
I don't. There are no triggers for growth today. Gross fixed capital formation has declined quarter upon quarter upon quarter for the last several quarters. Credit has not picked up. Overall credit growth is about 5 or 5.1%. If you break it down to SME, large industry, etc., it's a pretty pathetic picture. Thirdly, investment is an act of faith. I've spoken to dozens of businessmen. No one seems to be confident that he should borrow money, raise his own funds and invest. If entrepreneurship has been hit, the confidence of entrepreneurs has been hit, if there is no private investment, if gross fixed capital formation shows decline every quarter, and if credit is not demanded by investors, Where are the triggers for growth?
But those triggers had stopped even in your tenure for various reasons. We're going to come to that in just a bit. But do you not also blame the RBI?
Don't make a passing remark without getting an answer.
I will come to a very specific question on that. But don't you also blame the RBI in the same breath for not being prepared with data on demonetization? I mean, one doesn't know what kind of money is extinguished. One doesn't know what will be a special dividend. Shouldn't Mint Street also shoulder some part of whistling in the dark?
I do. I think the RBI should come out of its hibernation and speak to the people. But I think RBI has been so soundly rebuked by everyone in India and everyone abroad who matters. So the RBI is now scared to open its mouth.
So you believe growth for this fiscal, and your party yesterday said in that realistic assessment that growth could take a hit of over 1%, if not 1%, completely. Where do you see growth settle for next financial year?
Oh, I said it yesterday. The next 2 financial years, 17-18 and 18-19, growth will not exceed 6 to 6.5%.
For both those years?
Each year, not together.
I understand that. So by when do you expect demonetization's impact to wane off from the Indian economy?
Oh, demonetization's impact on small and medium industry will take 1.5 to 2 years. Demonetization's impact on large industry may be a shorter time, but demonetization's impact on consumer confidence, on the confidence of the consumer in the banking system, that he will keep his money in the banks.
And safe there.
All that has been rudely shaken. So the shadow of demonetization will fall certainly in 2017-18 and most probably in 2018-19 also.
I'm glad you mentioned consumer confidence, because you've cued me to my next question. Given the fact that demand and consumption have both taken a hit, according to your own accord, should this budget then be a stimulus budget? Should it be a budget that should not just focus on investment but also to revive consumption?
It should. But they're talking about cutting direct taxes. It's a wrong thing to do. You should cut indirect taxes.
I'll come to taxes in a bit, because I know you've written on that and I want you to expound.
That's the only trigger
further.
they have. They have no other trigger. They can't increase public expenditure because there is no space for very enhanced public expenditure.
You mean avenues are restricted?
No, they don't have the fiscal space.
When you say they should stimulate consumption, the counter argument to that, some people like Jahangir Aziz have said that if the government is in fact saying that demonetization is going to have a transitory impact, you are going to add inflationary pressures to the economy because demand will eventually pick up, and here you are overloading demand. Doesn't that argument cut ice with you?
It doesn't, because the effect of demonetization will not be transitory. So I don't buy the argument that it is only a transitory effect. The effect is over a longer period, and therefore it would be wise for the government to use whatever trigger it can find to give a boost to the economy.
What could those triggers be?
As I said, cut indirect taxes, cut excise duty, and cut service tax.
Isn't that counter to what the government would do? Because here is a GST regime that's going to kick in, and many people believe the threshold rationalization will have to happen to catch up with that rate. So actually the rates would have gone up, and here you are arguing for rates to go down. Because
they disrupted the economy. They did not do enough to promote private investment in the years before demonetization. If demonetization was on their minds when they came into office, they should have spent the first 2 years promoting private investment. Today, private investment is down, private consumption is down, exports are down. The only trigger they have is public expenditure, public investment. But that, the fiscal space is restricted. Because if GDP growth falls, then the space you have for borrowing also shrinks.
You've been a strong advocate for the last 72 hours of private sector investment being crowded in. Why is it enough not being done? But private sector stopped investing even under your tenure and the tenure of UPA, and that has perhaps continued. Will you blame the government alone for stalled private sector investment? Because
You're
they
wrong.
are over-leveraged, there is overcapacity.
You have either not looked into the numbers or you're ignoring them. Look at GFCF. During the UPA period, GFCF was always positive and brisk. Yes, we took a hit firstly in 2008. We filled the breach by public investment. Then we took a hit again in 2012 when Ben Bernanke made that thoughtless remark and there was a capital outflow. Then again we cut indirect taxes to boost investment, and the result is there for all to see. According to the CSO's new series numbers, in the last 2 years of UPA, growth was 6.1% in 2012-13 and 6.6% in 2013-14.
Yes.
Now, one of the ministers, Minister Goyal, continues to say you grew at 4.4%, which means he doesn't believe his own CSO or he's not read the CSO's numbers. 6.1% and 6.9% in the last 2 years of UPA, when the whole world was growing at about 2.5%, is certainly not something to be scoffed at.
But
GFCF turned negative and declining only in the last 6 or 7 quarters.
What is the reason for that? Because the same corporates who perhaps are not investing today had a lot of faith in this government. So what has really held back investments then?
I'm surprised myself. It could mean any number of things. I'm only speculating. Well, firstly, there is no one in the government to hear the woes of corporates and to lend them a helping hand.
You're telling me the finance minister is not doing his job?
I don't know. I'm only speculating. Second could be the project monitoring group, which we had set up, and we made Mr. Anil Swarup the first in charge. That I think is completely defunct now, which means they are not moving stalled projects. Every major business house that I know has at least one stalled project. And when there is one stalled project in your basket, you're afraid to invest more.
You don't invest more.
The third could be the excesses of the tax enforcement departments. Every businessman has got a story to tell me about excesses of the tax enforcement department. Apparently, there is no control over the tax enforcement departments.
You're making a serious allegation here because this is the same government and the same people who said...
I'm repeating what things I hear.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But, you know, this is the same establishment that said that we are going to end tax terror. Yes. Are you telling me they have brought it out in a different
Just go and
demeanor?
talk to businessmen. Go and talk to businessmen and they will tell you what it means.
You've been a finance minister for many, many years. You presented 10 budgets, 2 of which were interim. Is there always a disconnect between what the taxman does and what the finance minister actually wants or sometimes vocalizes?
No. But see, the tax enforcement officials have to enforce the tax laws as the government interprets them and as the courts interpret them. I don't think they have a right to make their own interpretations. They are only the enforcers of the law, not the interpreters of the law. That's a function for the court and for the executive through Parliament. Apparently, what is happening is each one is interpreting the law in his or her own way. And either the Central Board of Direct Taxes and Central Board of Excise and Customs are not cracking the whip on those who are deviating and making their own interpretations.
And I'm going to go back to the direct tax argument that you made, that why should they cut direct taxes? But why not? They've done demonetization. They may want to be populist. They may want to bring about some kind of ease to the common man who queued up there for his own money. Isn't that a realistic expectation that people of India may have from this budget?
Who are the people of India? Let's answer the question, people of India. I'm not against cutting direct taxes. Question is this the year and time to do that? If you have the luxury of cutting both indirect taxes and direct taxes, go ahead.
But you don't
have that luxury. So between the two, if you want to promote aggregate demand, You must cut the taxes that are paid by crores and crores of people, which is indirect taxes. It will help the rich, the middle class and the poor. If you cut direct taxes, there are about 3.5 crore personal income tax assessees, out of which I think about 1 crore or more pay no taxes. They just file a return, but they're not paying any meaningful amount of tax. So you cut the direct tax rate, it will help at most about 1 crore of people who are in the 30% and 20% bracket. But if you cut indirect taxes,
it's going to have wider
it will
implications.
help several crores of people, and the aggregate demand will get such a big boost.
Why are you at this stage opposed to a cut in corporate taxes? The government made that promise, hasn't walked the talk at all on this one.
Because I don't think corporate taxes need to be cut. The effective rate of corporate tax in this country is approximately 22% or so, after you allow for the exemptions. Etc. And many of them pay only the minimum alternate tax.
One of the things that the Prime Minister said, I think almost a month back, was that markets should begin contributing to India's story, which almost made a case for the reintroduction of the long-term capital gains tax.
And the next day the Finance Minister
and next day there was a clarification that came in. But if I may ask you, when we are as a Finance Minister, you look at revenue receipts and you look at avenues that you can perhaps tax and lawfully so. You don't think it's time to tax the markets just yet, or at least review the definition of long-term capital gains? There is some buzz about this being increased from 12 to 24 months now.
You see, if you want to increase from 12 to 24 months, in fact, I saw an analyst give a way out. He said, sell now and then buy it again, the same stock, the same mutual fund, the same units, you buy it tomorrow. So you start your 12-month period again. So I don't think these bring in great additional revenue. People will find ways to save on taxes. These don't bring great additional revenue. Additional revenue comes if there is new investment throwing up new incomes, both personal income and corporate income. That is not happening. I think the only source that the Finance Minister can really explore is to go a big way into disinvestment. There he has an opportunity, and his party is more favorable to big ticket disinvestment than any other party in Parliament. He has an absolute majority. So if they believe in big ticket disinvestment, this is the time to go for big ticket disinvestment.
I agree with you that they are perhaps more attuned to disinvestment, and NDA 1 had done it previously and all of that. But isn't your suggestion a little politically unrealistic? You've been a finance minister yourself. It's never easy to divest public sector units.
No, it depends upon which party is in government and what its strength is. Even UPA 1, where the Congress party had only 145 seats in Parliament, we did attempt to disinvest in major companies. In UPA 2 also we disinvested. But this government has 282, plus its allies make it about 335. As I said, they are more inclined to big ticket disinvestment, so go ahead and try that.
Why are they not doing it?
I don't know, should ask them.
You're also against the banking transaction tax, but...
outdated.
Outdated, yes. But my question is that one of the legs on which they built this whole demonetization argument was that we want to move to a less cash, a more digital economy. For that to happen, you have to incentivize cash. Don't you think it's an idea that's worth exploring? And
no, not
why
worth
not?
It. You see, you don't tax a transaction which has no objective. Putting money and taking money is a simple ministerial act. There's no objective. You tax sale, you tax a purchase, you tax manufacture, you tax value addition, you tax exports, you tax imports. You don't tax simply transacting, like taking money out of an account and putting money into an account. That to me is completely meaningless. We did it because we did not have any other instrument at that time. Since
and you had to
then,
withdraw?
Oh, after 3 years.
Yes.
But in those 3 years, I put in place very significant instruments. One, we set up the FIU. We introduced the suspicious transaction reporting system. Millions of items of data pour into the FIU every day. Then we introduced third-party reporting. If you buy a car today, the car dealer is bound to report. If you register a property for sale or purchase, the registrar of properties is bound to report. And finally, we amended the Income Tax Act to make certain transactions mandatorily non-cash. So expand that list.
You've called this a balloon that has been raised in the public domain of sorts, which is a possible farm loan waiver.
It could be a kite for all you know.
For all we know, but somebody from the opposition can turn around and say, you can waive off the farm loans, why can't we?
I didn't say farm loan was a balloon. I said UBI was a balloon.
I was going to come to UBI in just a bit. I'm talking about the farm loan waiver right now, because you're a sharp critic of this public discourse.
I didn't say farm loan waiver is good or bad. I didn't make any judgment. I said I've seen these balloons being floated. Which one they will catch, which one they will let fly, I don't know.
Will you applaud or criticize if they were to waive off farm loans at this stage?
I don't know. They'll have to make a case for farm loan waiver. If they make out a strong case for farm loan waiver, why should I oppose it? After all,
the rural economy is stagnant, the rural economy is suffering.
My party in the UP has promised a farm loan waiver. My party in Punjab has promised a farm loan waiver. So why should I oppose a farm loan waiver for the sake of opposing?
So you will be on board if they were to waive off farm loans?
I'd like to see what kind of package they work out. You see,
I want to go back to the deficit.
Yes. My farm loan waiver, every rupee that was waived
was counted for.
Paid for by the government. We funded the banks. So if they waive farm loans, the budget is to provide the money.
From the day you demitted office to now, the one big red line that you talk about, and I think the one that you did not ever breach yourself, was fiscal deficit.
Yes.
But a lot of people believe that given demonetization, and it was a brave, bold, perhaps a controversial move, but it's a move that the government made. Very controversial.
I can use other adjectives.
Yes.
Ill-conceived, foolish.
I'm not going to use those words. Those are your words, not mine.
Yeah, but they are not unparliamentary words.
They're not unparliamentary at all. But I'm going to talk to you about the fiscal deficit. People believe the time has come and one doesn't need to be fixated with the fisc. Why can we not delay fiscal consolidation for a year if we are going to, in fact, spend in the quest of growth? What's wrong with that argument? And perhaps that's also what the NK Singh panel seems to suggest. Some sort of expansion.
The NK Singh panel has carved out, I think, 3 or 4 exceptions. And I think they are wrong. The only exception that is justifiable is when there is a declared war. I'm clear on that. Be that as it may. In a 5-year tenure, you delayed fiscal consolidation by 1 year already. So you have used your one exception. Second, 2015-16, it turns out you did not achieve 3.9%. It turned out to be 4.6. So you've already used your second opportunity of an exception.
CSO just a little while back has actually revised fiscal year 16's growth figures also to 7.9%. So I don't know if 4.6 complement for fiscal year 16, the same year where they breached the fiscal deficit.
15-16.
Yes, to from 7.6 to 7.9%.
CSO's new series is becoming more and more a joke. They should publish the growth figures under the old series and new series in parallel, so people will draw their own conclusions. That is the right way to go about it. When you switch over from one system to another, one method to another, the honest thing to do is to publish figures under both methodologies so that people can draw their own conclusions.
Why is such a sharp critique of the UBI? It's being mentioned in the economic survey today, and Arvind Subramaniam is going to town promoting this one, but why are you opposed to this?
I'm not opposed to it. You read my article. I said, in principle, it is unexceptionable. In a period when there's growing inequality, if there are poor people, they have to be brought up to a certain threshold of consumption. Universal basic income, in principle, is not a bad thing, maybe a good thing. Question is India at a stage of development when it can afford a UBI? And is the present government kept the economy in such fine fettle that it can afford UBI this year? Answer to both questions is no. India is not at a stage of economic development where we can afford UBI. And today, certainly, the government cannot afford UBI.
And the UBI and subsidies can't coexist. Don't you agree with that?
Of course, the UBI is supposed to replace
Supersede
other,
all of those,
other subsidies, because UBI will bring you up to a threshold level of consumption.
Your real assessment of the economy has also criticized job creation. 77,000 jobs created between July and September 2016.
Labour Bureau's number.
Yes, of which 50,000 had been created in the government. What are the avenues of job creation? You look at the global economy around us, exports are languishing. Where will jobs be created?
By investment. They have killed jobs. 80% of SMEs in this country were closed after November 8. They have not opened again. Just go to the hub towns of small and medium industry. Tirupur, Pollachi, Coimbatore area. I was in Hyderabad, Medak area. SMEs are closed. If SMEs are closed, each one has axed 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs. That is why there is a spurt in Maganrega demand. 60% rise in Maganrega demand. Now, way to create jobs is to promote investment in industry, especially manufacturing, and in services. That's where jobs are created. But if there is no private investment, no job creation will take place.
It's 24 hours to the budget, and I'm reasonably certain Finance Minister Jaitley will be watching this interview because your opinion does matter and it does count. What would your advice to him be?
I've given 5 do's and 5 don'ts. I'm going to rate him on those 5 plus 5. If he does all the 5 and he doesn't do all the 5 don'ts, I'll give him 10 out of 10. I'm going to rate him on 5 plus 5.
What's the one big thing if he fails on, it's over for you?
Nothing is ever over.
It's over for you. The whole exercise of assessment is over.
Nothing is ever over. If he doesn't stick to fiscal consolidation, fiscal deficit 3%, current account deficit, not entirely under his control, but you have to indicate some kind of a current account deficit of about 1.5%, 1.5, 1.7, and an inflation target between 4 and 5. If he sticks to that, that is the first do, I think he will get high marks, because the world is watching that. The world has lost confidence in India's ability to remain on the path of fiscal prudence. This is the impression I gather by talking to a number of people, including people who visit India. I think that's the first do. There are other things I've said you must do. Cut indirect taxes. If he cuts indirect taxes, I'll be the first to applaud him. On the contrary, if he cuts only direct taxes, underline, only direct taxes, I will be a sharp critic. For I've given 5 do's, I've given 5 don'ts, in the absolute confidence that my advice is unsolicited. But that's okay.
It's an advice that matters. Thanks very much, sir, for speaking to us. Pleasure.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.